Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to another special guest episode. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Dr. Johanna Moore, and she is going to share more about her journey and her story as a dermatopathologist and as a human being, as well as her special interests in coaching women on money issues, which is so important. We're going to hear all about that. But Johanna, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, tell us just a little bit about yourself. Where in the world are you? A little bit about your work.
Sure. I live on the West Coast, just north of Santa Barbara, right by the ocean, living my dream life. And I am a dermatopathologist and general pathologist in the community. I have changed my roles over time from strict just looking at skin biopsies all the way out to running the entire lab, the labs in my areas, and then shrinking back down to dermatopathology. And that is part of my personal burnout story, actually. Yeah. And I have twins. They are almost 10 and the love of my life. And we live with my husband and my mother. And it's just been really great living out here. And I feel really grateful for my life and my journey so far.
Yeah, awesome. We're West Coast partners there. So always love that. So yeah, let's jump right into getting to hear more about your story. You shared a little bit there, but I always like for people to hear what was going on, where were you struggling, and how did you start to notice kind of the stage that you were in?
Well, as most people probably listening to this podcast, I am a consummate overachiever. I can remember when I was looking for schools to go to, for residencies to go to, and I was at The Ohio State University. And I remember sitting at dinner with a friend of mine who was already a physician. And she said, "Why do you want to leave?" Because I had a boyfriend, I had a great life. I really loved being in Columbus, Ohio. And I said, "I just feel like I want to prove that I can do it, that I'm smart enough to do it." And she said, "But why do you have to prove that?" And I didn't really have an answer for her at that time. And so I ignored her. I thought, in my mind at that time, well, she just isn't a high achiever.
Right. She just doesn't know.
And so I went on
to do this.
Right. Oh, well, she's just not tough enough or strong enough or ambitious enough.
Yeah.
And so I went to the Massachusetts General Hospital. That's where I matched in pathology. And I felt really, really proud of myself for getting such a high-ranking program. And I can remember even when I got there, I felt like already I was competing against the other residents on the first day. Mm-hmm. And that sense of competition really stuck with me for a very long period of time. I finally got out of residency and all my fellowships and took all my boards, and I made it onto the West Coast. And I felt so excited and so happy that I had made it in my private practice position. It was this kind of Camelot job at that time with equal partnership position, larger group, but not so large that you get lost and don't have a say. And I felt very special. During my process of onboarding, I felt like everybody was very happy for another dermatopathologist on board. And I really saw this picture of great growth here, and where I could finally be a leader, find my place, earn the money that I wanted to earn, have control over my time. And I found over the years, I mean, that's been over 10 years ago now, that things in life happen. And if you aren't mentally prepared for them and you don't have that base of stability that you're going to be okay and that you can take care of yourself no matter what, then you tend to get thrown around by all those outside sources. And for me, that was a big part of my journey, was moving into a situation where I felt a lot of blame towards my circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And like changes in partnership positions, changes in bosses, changes in Medicare reimbursement, all of those things that physicians all across the country are dealing with. Maybe you live in a hospital setting, you work in a hospital setting, and you have little control that you understand over your position as an employee, as a physician in the hospital. It was similar for me. I felt like I couldn't get what I wanted because of these overarching issues around me.
Wow.
And that really was the beginning of my burnout story, was try to fight to get away from that. And initially, I am by nature an impatient person, and I'm an actor. Like, I act immediately. And for those of you out there, you might think that's a good thing, but sometimes if you're going to burn down the house, it's not a good thing. And I quit my job very quickly when I realized that I was not going to have a partnership position in that firm. And I, instead of kind of waiting it out and growing from it and figuring out my place, maybe somewhere else, I just cut that tie. And that was either stupid or very brave. I'm still not sure.
We'll
But
decide a story about it later, right?
Right. Like, we'll be fine. So what if I'm the breadwinner of the family? So, but the reason why that was a good thing was because it taught me how to create my first business. I created my first medical corporation and became an independent contractor. I did not have to move. That is a huge point that I'd like to make, is that if you are in a situation where you realize, hopefully after more thought than I did, that your job is not for you, it does not mean that you have to leave the area. And it does not mean that you have to only go to the competing pathology or hospital group. There's always a choice to start your own company. And it's not that hard. So that's what I did. And I spent almost a year trying to work on my own as an independent contractor. And again, I found that there were outside sources pushing me out of where I wanted to be. And in that situation, it was billing. And billing, really, I ran out of money very fast because of billing. And so I went back into an employment position with a different group, and it was a much better situation for me. And I started getting paychecks again, and that was really great. But because it was a move of necessity at that point, because the money had run out, I was making choices from a point of lack of resources. And when you do that, when you're making choices because you have to, you sometimes miss out on the nuances and the power that you have to negotiate the deal that you really want. And what I found is the next few years after that, instead of sticking to dermatopathology, there wasn't enough work for me in that practice to do dermatopathology, which is what I think is easy and fun and what I trained so hard and so long for. So I really started spreading out into other aspects of pathology, which I still could do, but just took a lot more energy for me. I had to make new workflows. I had to read more to make sure that I was at the top of my quality. And I started spreading myself really thin into leadership, into teaching, into anything that anybody needed. I was there. I was the first one to answer any calls. I was always available. And sooner or later, I was working very, very hard for as much money as I had even before I quit my first job.
Yeah, because we delude ourselves, right? Dilute, dilute, not delude. We might be deluding ourselves too. But Yeah, by agreeing to sort of, I'm going to take on all the roles. I'm going to be the one who answers the questions, even if it's not my patient. And we diminish our own pay because those things are not reimbursed. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also because they are not what you're really good at. The other thing.
Right. Because you said it took a lot more energy to do all these things. It wasn't, as we say, kind of the zone of genius for you.
And there was a lot of going back to your question about what was my thought process at that time. There was a lot of, I'm not enough, so I have to show that I'm always there, that I'm indispensable.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of that.
Yeah. And that connects back to even before residency with that. I have to prove myself. I have to prove that I can do this really hard thing and be a superstar. We've moved the goalpost around. It sounds okay. Well, if I can't be the rock star dermatopathologist because there's not enough of that, then I'm going to be the most amazing person here who does all of the things.
Spoken like a true coach.
And somebody who's experienced much of the same.
Yeah, the root cause was definitely I'm not enough and have to figure out a way to prove that I am.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about that a little bit because of course you're a coach as well. And we've got a lot of us have this underlying sense of I'm not enough right now. I need to do X, Y, and Z things. In your experience, how does that work out for people?
It never works out well. Well, I'll take that back. I think that it's a bell-shaped curve.
Mm.
I think that many women who become physicians or become high-achieving professionals in any field, they are driven by negative emotions, and that's what makes them so successful.
Yeah.
And one of the negative emotions is I'm not enough.
Right.
That's what gets them out of bed every morning.
Right.
I'm not enough, so I better go prove it right.
Push until I meet whatever I've decided is enough. Although what happens next for most of it is, okay, I'm going to move the goalpost again because this can't possibly be enough right now.
Exactly. Yeah. Totally. And it's a never-ending cycle. And then you reach a point where you actually are freaking amazing and highly skilled expert who can bring in that kind of money that makes anyone else jealous, and you're still not enough. And when you get to that point, I think that's like the top. It starts to go downhill. Mm-hmm. And I think that in my audience, that's the point where usually they look for me because they realize that they can't do anymore. They don't have any more time, and they don't really want to anymore.
Right. We know they're doing that's too much.
Too much. Yeah. And not seeing the rewards. And that's the thing, is that you reach a point where that thought, I'm not enough, is no longer serving you. It's a detriment.
Yeah. So then walk us through, you've kind of been in this place, right? Sort of trying to be enough at work, trying to spread yourself really thin, not trying to spread, feeling yourself spread too thin. What changed? What happened there that led to something else?
I think that is exactly what we were just talking about. I got to the point where I couldn't put any more positive action behind that thought that I'm not enough. And so I was forced to change that thought. And thankfully, I started changing that thought, working on that thought. I realized myself that was a thought that I had to change. Yeah. And so I started doing my personal work, my work with coaches and reading and yoga and philosophy and all the things. And while I was working on it, because it does take time if you really want to solve your problem of feeling burned out, my actions started catching up with that old thought, and mistakes started coming up. I started dropping the ball in certain areas. I started feeling lack of interest in certain parts of my job, and real kind of dreading of going to work and being at work and not getting very much done while I was at work. And eventually I made a mistake that mattered, that really scared me. It was a typographical mistake that had clinical repercussions.
Yeah.
And at that point, my boss got involved and said, we need to figure this out. What's happening to you? And I was very lucky that finally my boss stepped in and stopped me, because as probably you and many people listening feel the same way, that it's very hard for us to stop.
Yes.
And
it's
so
hard for us to step in and stop others.
very hard. Yeah.
Because I don't know all the reasons. I conjecture, right? Some of it is, well, if I see that they're struggling and I intervene, I'm overstepping, but maybe I also have to confront something in myself.
Yeah. It's also the fear of making them feel vulnerable and bad, and being the person to tell them that they're wrong.
Emotions in them. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, to skip ahead a little bit in my journey, after I had figured everything out and was doing quite well again, the very same mistake happened again to another person in my practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't confront him about that. And I don't know if I'm sure he probably knew what happened to me. He never talked to me about it.
Mm-hmm.
And we aren't that close, so maybe that's part of it. But still, I think in a true partnership relationship practice in medicine, you should feel open enough and secure enough to talk to your colleagues about things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. But so much shame gets wrapped up in all of that. Of
so much shame.
How dare I make a mistake? How dare they make a mistake? How could this happen? What does this mean about me? Mistakes happen, right?
I felt so much shame. Yeah. I almost quit medicine completely at that point because of the shame. Yeah. And instead what I did was I quit everything else except dermpath. I said, that's all I want to do. I don't even care if it's full time. Just put me in dermpath. I know I can do that. And even then I began to wonder, can I even do my subspecialty that I trained in, that I'm so good at?
Yeah. Well, and that's a moment, it sounds like, too, where decisions sort of came out of lack. It maybe didn't seem at the time, but here's this, well, I made a mistake in an area that's a lot of work and I'm not very comfortable in, because I maybe prefer to be over here, I'm more interested in over here. And so we pull back, deciding that, okay, well, that's not for me. I mean, I see that in other areas too. I see in family medicine, people pull back from doing simple office procedures because something happened and didn't go well. And rather than allowing the negative emotion, like allowing the shame to be there and sort of processing it, getting help, seeking some guidance, we just kind of shrivel up, right? We kind of shrink inside, say, okay, I can't do that. And it often it feels terrible. And so that lack of confidence kind of goes along with that, doesn't it? Of like, ooh, I had to pull back from this other area. I'm not even good at the things I think.
At all. Yeah. Yeah. And then you have to explain to people why you changed. And in our circle, people don't back out. They keep going forward. Right. So there was a lot of that.
Right.
Dealing with that. Like, why did I stop?
Yeah. And people want to know, but you probably don't want to tell them. It's like, oh, this terrible thing happened. I'd rather just allowing myself to be human.
Yeah. And I think what's so funny about that is that you feel so alone, like you are the only person who ever made a mistake in medicine. You must be a bad person. Like, you must not have been on your game.
Practice, like this particular mistake, right? When clearly we learned later, oh, nope, somebody else did the exact same thing.
The exact same thing.
Right? Which means it's happened hundreds of times in other lab settings.
Yeah. And then I found out that even people in leadership who I look up to, in leadership because of similar situations.
Yeah, I've often noted that people who are feeling burned out or had a bad outcome or something in carting back our clinical practice, there's often a creating of, okay, I'm going to go be a leader. I'm going to go be a this to protect myself from that pain because we don't learn about shame, right? And that shame is normal. Like shame is normal. I think we often feel shame at times that are not appropriate. They're too we shouldn't feel shame when we say the wrong thing or make a mistake. It's very simple of, it's like we missed a telehealth appointment or some benign mistake, but that can trigger so much shame because we've convinced ourselves we have to do everything just right.
Completely. I want to go back a little bit to the comment you made about making another decision out of the space of lack, scarcity. And I completely agree with you. I also think that at some point you reach a level of emotional intelligence when you start to believe yourself at what you really should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, there definitely was I give up. I don't want to do this anymore. This is too hard.
Mm-hmm.
But there was also a deep desire to move back to only things that I feel like I was meant to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, it was contracting my practice and expanding my coaching business. Mm-hmm. And I actually own another business with my husband. He's a massage therapist. So it's very interesting. I did an activity that I always recommend to people in my group when we're doing goal setting, if they're still kind of lost as to what their purpose is, what they want. And it was an exercise where you wrote your own obituary, like a New York Times obituary. And then you write it and then you put it away for a little while and then you come back and you read it. Mm-hmm. And I wrote mine, and this is maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I wrote mine, I put it away, and then I came back to it. I think it was right when I joined EntreMD business school. And I joined when I had my medical corporation. So there was no She Is Money, and the coaching thing was not existent yet. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote down everything, and then I read it again, and I realized that I hadn't written a single thing about being a physician, her obituary. Mm-hmm. And I did not purposefully do that. It was definitely a stream of thought type activity. And that was when I really started a deep dive into my own personal exploration of, well, if that's not what I think my life is about, maybe we should be pursuing these other things that I talked about. I talked a lot about working with my husband and being with my family. And that was really the beginning of my true entrepreneurship journey. And the reason why I tell you that is because I think that everything happens for a reason, and you get to choose how to move that into whatever direction you want. But if you don't have any understanding of who you are, who you want to be, what legacy you want to leave, what you're doing on this planet, then it's easy to get bounced around like I was getting bounced around earlier in my career. For me, I really had a deep understanding at that point when I had made that mistake and was really at the top of my burnout phase, that I had other things in my life that were more important for me to do. And it made it so much easier, even though I did have all that shame and disappointment and feelings of inadequacy. It felt better than the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a moving through.
Yes.
And an ability to see your story, maybe not in the moment, but to see your story in a way that served you, right? To be able to connect these things of, okay, I'm not only a physician. I need to put attention into these other things. I need to recognize and honor that part of myself that wants something beyond being a physician. And consequently, to do that, it probably required a narrowing of focus or less time, spent on the physician work if that wasn't serving him, especially like knowing that the general pathology was, it was just kind of too much. It was too much bandwidth in a way that didn't feel great. Sounds like.
Yeah, for sure. And the funny thing is that when I did switch back to DermPath, it wasn't a full switch. I mean, you have to honor your other colleagues and patients in the community. So it wasn't like, I'm never doing this again. It was more like, okay, I'll help you cover so that the practice doesn't fall apart. And I was very grateful for the fact that they were helping me facilitate that for me. But what I found was that there was a period of time in the beginning when I made the switch where I was doing a lot less work.
Right.
It felt like a lot less work. But like you were saying, obviously what I found out after the fact was that it was reimbursing very well. And all the other things, all the other work that were making me feel productive were not things that we were being reimbursed for, and probably weren't helping people as much as I expected that they were. Yeah. There was a lot of redundancy before and a lot of focus after. And 3 months after I switched into DermPath only, I actually received a mid-year bonus of $10,000.
Wow.
And I hadn't received a bonus in a long time. So I did less. I did what I loved. I did what I was good at. I stayed in my lane. And I earned more money.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk a little bit about kind of money and sort of what this has become for you, because you have a coaching practice that focuses around that. Tell us a little bit about where that desire came from and how did you get going? Because of course, a lot of people listening have fantasies of doing something else beyond medicine, sometimes with medicine, sometimes instead of medicine. And they have so much fear about, I don't know if I can do this. And you and I have the perspective of, it's not actually that hard. It's not something that we usually know too much about having a business, but tell us a little bit more about kind of those interests in this journey.
Absolutely. That really hits on the head, sort of what I feel like encompasses this So Money Society, is what my membership is called. I help women realize that they can make a whole bunch more money than they think they can without the hustle. And I think that almost all people who don't own a business have a mentality, an employment mentality, that your time is worth a certain amount of money. And when you start delving into the entrepreneurship realm, you realize that time is not the only thing that influences money. It's more people, more sales, and some of those things are reproducible in a way that doesn't have to do with time. And I think that for me, number one, realizing that I could make money, which is another employment mentality issue that a lot of people have.
Meaning I could make money on the side?
At all. The thought that I spent like 20 years studying to be a dermatopathologist. And then I come out and on one side, I expected a certain salary. And on the other side, I felt like somebody was giving it to me. It wasn't, I have this amazing skill and I'm going to get money for it. It was, I need to find someone to pay me for this skill. So number one, I think a lot of physicians, especially women physicians, because of the whole patriarchy history in our lives, in our history, I think that we don't believe that we deserve, again, that money. And number two, we connect the money that we're earning to our self-worth. And we don't realize that it's just that we have immense value that people want to pay for. And I can remember when I first realized I was unhappy in my first job, and I can remember lying on the bathroom floor crying to my husband, who is an entrepreneur. I don't have anything that I can make money with. Nothing, like not even in medicine, like nothing. And now the person I am now, looking back on that, I can think of 100,000 different things that I could have done. Sell your rug on your
Right.
floor. It's very simple to make
Yeah.
money. It's very hard to feel, number one, like you can. Number two, like anybody will buy from you. Number three, like it aligns with who you are. And so that's really where I had to make my changes, and
Yeah.
where his money came from was, if someone who's like at the top of her academic career, who can't get any more training, don't know how to make money, then nobody else does.
Right. What's going on? What do you think is kind of the block underlying those challenges that you mentioned of kind of the ability to make money at all, kind of using your skills? Like, I have a sense of what I think I would say is the key, but I'm curious to know what you think is the key there.
I think that a lot of it is, as I said before, just that people don't know how, and they are afraid that it's very difficult. And when you start to do it, there are uncomfortable things that you have to do that are rooted again in scarcity. For
Mhm.
instance, a lot of people, including me sometimes, are scared to death to look at their bank accounts.
Right.
And I think that's rooted from the lack of empowerment of being able to make more money, is that all you can do is just not buy Starbucks or shrink
Right.
because you only have a set amount of money coming your way. And once you just open up to the idea that you actually can make more money, then it's, well, you have two things to work with now. You have a lot more freedom as to what's coming in and what's going out.
Mhm.
And one thing that I think is really very challenging before you understand how to even make a couple dollars a day recurring revenue is that you you write down all your numbers, and you write down your ins and your outs, and you write down what comes in, and then you write down what you're spending on. And most of us get paid biweekly or monthly. So it's like you write down this really big number on one column, and then on the other column, every single day you have 5, 10 things. And
Yeah.
it's it's very demoralizing that you don't have that balance, that you can't say, okay, today I went to Target, I spent $150. I'm just going to sell one more product and then I'm even. You
Mhm.
can't do that if you don't know how to sell. So for me, a big part of what I do is, yes, of course, I teach financial literacy. I teach people how to invest, how to save. I teach them that, but really the bulk of what I teach is, how do you start your first business? How do you start a side hustle? How do you optimize your current job? How do you gain that sense of empowerment to ask your boss for a raise? It's a lot easier if you have a side gig. Spoiler alert. You're a lot less scared to lose your job because you know that it's okay.
And that connects to what I think is underlying a lot of this is the fear of asking. And I certainly sit in that fear more often than I would like, but that fear of asking for people to reflect the value that you provide with money, right? When you're asking someone to buy something, to come work with you, if you're recruiting patients into your private practice, or yes, here's my product, here's my book, you are asking, even if it's not always in a question. And we have been taught and socialized not to ask, because that implies that I think that we internalize our worth enough to know that we have value to offer.
Yeah. And I would say, even one step further, once you reach the point where you actually can ask, is that you stop asking and you start offering,
Mhm.
because your self worth is so much more than, that's what she is money is you're worth more than any amount of money. You just need to relay to the other person why that's so important. What is it that you're solving for them that's so urgent that they want it? They don't they're not going to just pay you because, oh, okay, Megan, like, I feel bad for you. I'll pay you. It's not that. It's okay. You're good. Like, all right,
Value.
you're good enough, doctor. No, it's not that.
Yeah.
It's, I need you. And I think that's something that all of us need to work on more
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm sold. Well, and
Yeah.
speak a little bit too about as you have sort of come into more alignment on these particular professional goals, you've had some things that have come along with that in your personal life that have been maybe invaluable to you. So share a little bit about that too, because I think it could be easy for us to look at, well, I'm either focused on my career or I'm focused on my family, and the other one's always going to suffer.
It's so amazing. I remember that feeling that I just do not have any more time. And sometimes I fall into that trap still. Like my roof right now is leaking, and I keep saying, I just don't have time for that. But really, what I mean is, I don't know how to do it. I'm scared to learn how. I'm scared to realize how bad it really is. So I'm just going to say, I can't. I don't have the time to ignore it. And I went from feeling like my job as a physician was life encompassing. I can remember when my twins were babies and I just was signing out cases at 3 a.m. Like I couldn't find any other time. To in the past couple of years, I'm working towards my Taekwondo black belt. I am about to get yoga certified in the Chopra yoga teacher training. I got my life coach training. I have multiple courses that I'm working on. I have 3 businesses now. And then I like talk to a physician who I think would be a great fit for the community, or a nurse who's a great fit for the community. And they tell me, I just don't have time right now. I just don't have the bandwidth right now. And I have to chuckle to myself because there's no possible way that they're doing more than I am. There's no possible way. And I think
Where are the priorities, right, for them?
yes, it's priorities. It's allowing yourself to focus on one thing and then drop it and focus on another thing. It's knowing what your purpose is. I know that my purpose is not just being a physician. I know that there's something much bigger than me that I'm trying to create right now. And that is what wakes me up in the morning. It's not, I'm not enough anymore. It's people need to hear what I have learned.
Yeah, so good.
Because they think that they are not enough.
They're still in that place, and I want to get them out. I'm going to pull them out, pull them up, and say, we don't have to do that anymore.
Don't do that anymore. Just don't do it.
For somebody who is out there listening, I always ask if there's something that you really want them to know. That's a good one of we don't have to do that anymore. We don't have to wait for someone to hand us our worth. What else do you want them to know that you wish you could have known during some of those periods of burnout?
I just thought of something really powerful that I think everybody here needs to know. And it is that what you think is easy right now should be getting the most money for. You should be getting the most money for what you think is easy, because that means you're an expert at it. It means you love it. It means you spent time focusing on it, learning about it. And that's pointing you towards where you should be. It's not, oh, this is easy and you should feel bad about that.
Yeah.
Or you should do it for free because you like it. No, that's your superpower.
Yeah. I love that. That's a really good one. For people who are out there listening and they want to learn more about you, learn more about the coaching work that you do, I imagine probably no one is seeking out a dermatopathologist for their personal use, because that's not how we use dermatopathologists. But for someone who's
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, probably. Tell us a little bit where people can find you.
Yeah. If you are a dermatologist or a private practitioner in the Central Coast, I'm accepting clients.
There you go.
But really what I'd like to tell you about is She Is Money. I have a company called She Is Money. It's my coaching company. It helps ambitious, mostly healthcare professionals, high achieving healthcare professional women figure out realize that they can make more money without working harder and figure out what that stream is, what that income stream is, whether it's in your job, a side hustle, or a completely new business, totally separate from healthcare. And it's called the So Money Society. There are amazing women in there. They are all kicking butt and learning how to make more money and live amazing lives that they want to be living, both in work and outside of work. So if your problem right now is that you hate your job and you can't get rid of it because of the money, then you need to figure out how to change that. And you can find me on Instagram. That's where I'm the most active, at sheismoney.llc. And you can look me up. My website is www.sheismoney.com.
Awesome. And we'll have links to that in the show notes so that we can make it easy for people. Johanna, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a great conversation. And I think we all need to talk more about money and worth and sort of wrestling with some of those big questions. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a great time.
All right, my friends, that's all we have for this week. Join us next week as always. And until then, take care. Bye-bye. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.